Sorry for the delay in videos. I had a kidney stone problem that was a bit stressful, but I'm hopefully able to go back to making videos. And I'd like to start with a short one here, comparing vintage sports watch bracelets to contemporary ones. I have a few prior videos on vintage watch bracelets, so I thought this would fit in that category. It's funny, I've had these things for a very long time, but for some reason I never really thought about this particular point before, so I thought I'd put it out there. First, obviously, this is a contemporary Marine Master watch. Seiko Marine Master watch, and these are what you would call vintage watches from the 70s, large case sports watches. A lot of people take issue with these types of bracelets. These types of bracelets, I guess the closest definition would probably be Rolex President type, because they have these gaps and they have a lot of flexibility like this, and I guess the proper President would be like a half moon like this, or half circle rather, and like the Omega version is a different shape, but the concept is the same. Their main point, the main claim to fame, I guess you could say, is, aside from tapering in this case, great flexibility. Now, there's a caveat. If this is a well-worn bracelet, it may need servicing, and that is risky to wear. But if it's in good condition, or it's been serviced, I find these types of bracelets to be superior to contemporary ones. Many, again, refer to them as flimsy because I guess they see a bracelet that can do this, and they perhaps think enough money hasn't been spent on making something more beefy or solid. But there's a problem with that, at least from my perspective. Well, with these types of contemporary sports watch bracelets, they're very thick from the side profile. They usually don't have any gaps, and ultimately that means there's very little give when you do that. And I guess a lot of people feel now that if you spend a lot of money on a watch, it has to be really solid, and this is the definition of solid. Even though another caveat would be that the Marine Master bracelet is sort of controversial amongst collectors. Some feel it could be a lot better than it is, especially when compared to a Rolex one, but that's beyond the scope of this video. My point here is that this is, I think, a pretty good representation of a contemporary sports watch bracelet, and its main thing is it's thick and it doesn't have a lot of give. So when you put this watch on your wrist, it's going to sit the way it sits, and the only adjustability is in models that have adjustable clasps. Now, Rolexes have more fancy versions of this clasp, but the point is the same. You can extend it here, but you can't do anything else. So if you have it on your wrist and you need to move your hand around a lot with flexing, extending, things like that, this isn't really going to go anywhere, and in a battle between your skin and the bracelet's going to win. And sometimes I find a lot of activity isn't that comfortable for me personally when wearing a watch bracelet like this. If you, as I showed already, if you look at the flex that this has, it really makes it a lot more comfortable. First of all, you can even have air coming through, which is sort of nice in the summer. But the main thing, again, is the flexibility. And a key point here is these two watches are not much substantially smaller, if not smaller at all, than this one. This is just chunky all around. These are sort of oddball shapes, so their mass is sort of spread in different areas compared to the Marine Master, but the point is these watches are no smaller than this, and they still sit really well on the wrist with these types of bracelets. They're heavy, large watches, because when you have it on your wrist and you're flexing or extending, the bracelet will move with your wrist, giving you just a little bit more freedom, and I find that to be a really big convenience. To my knowledge, no one really makes, aside from Rolex, I guess, for the President, no one really makes these types of bracelets anymore unless it's an aftermarket. And some people have experimented with aftermarket versions of this on something like that. But the problem is with these contemporary watches that are so thick, especially have these thick lugs, if you try to put a very thin bracelet, third-party bracelet in here, it's going to look really silly in comparison to the thickness of the watch. Whereas these kinds of watches are also pretty thick, but the bracelet, I think, just works with the aesthetic, despite them having different shapes. So my take-home point here is, if you're new to collecting or branching out, don't make the mistake of dismissing these types of bracelets, thinking that they're flimsy. Some people really feel that to get their money's worth, they have to get something big and heavy and rigid. But the reality is, it's not such a good idea to have such a big, heavy, rigid bracelet, because it really does restrict activity. Maybe to a small extent, but in my experience, you could feel the difference. And that's about it for this video, and as usual, thanks for watching.